We're somewhere.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Well,
here they are.
today we have a couple of wines to taste in our first virtual live tasting. This is very exciting for us because, um, well, we're all closed in our own houses, and so we can't just share from one bottle. So we each have to have a bottle of our own of two wines, and then of course, once they're open, we'll have to dispense with them ourselves. So that's not all that bad. So here we are. We have the 2013 dry Riesling. Can I do this like they do in the movies? Okay, dry Riesling, yes. And the 2009 semi-dry Riesling, back when we used to call it semi-dry. I don't know who calls Riesling semi-dry other than the Finger Lakes, but that's the way it was 10 years ago. Everybody did. Now, not everybody does. Today, the equivalent wine in that category for us is called Riesling, simply said. So I guess we're going to get started with one of them, right? The older vintage, right, Megs?
Yeah, do the 2009. Do it.
Let's see. Looks like you're already tasting it. What do you think, Megs, about this 2009? Is it holding up well?
It's holding up beautifully. I think the acidity alone in the 2009 speaks volume to the longevity of the wine, but especially for being under cork, we're just starting to see some secondary characteristics, maybe just a hint of tertiary. So really progressing nicely. Like the balance points there, the liveliness is out of this world for that vintage. Like when we say '09, we're like, oh yeah, '09, but it's 2020, like 2009 having some life is a really cool thing.
Yeah.
I'm surprised how primary the fruit is on it still. As Meg said, I was expecting a little bit more of that, like beeswax or toast, or that sort of development aromatically. And this is still, I mean, you could tell me that it's just a couple years old in terms of how it's presenting in the glass, and how fresh it is in the mid palate as well.
Yeah. You both were using these terms of primary, secondary, and tertiary. That sounds like wine speak. Could you touch on what those mean for anybody who doesn't use those terms a lot?
Yeah. So primary usually refers to fresh fruit and very vibrant fruit. Secondary is a little bit more in it could be jammed fruit, but it could be maybe a little bit of beeswax, that sort of development, or honey. And then tertiary for me usually means when you get into more, I don't know, savory, less expected aromatics. So whether that's petrol and Riesling sometimes, or toast and nuts, and these sorts of very, I guess, savory sort of descriptors. The quick shorthand, and everyone has their own way of looking at it. For me, primary is fresh fruit and fresh fruit characteristics, very poppy characteristics in terms of they kind of leap out of the glass. Secondary is more whether it's cooked fruit or developed fruit, maybe some honeyed notes, but still leaning on the fruit side of things. And then tertiary is more the savory notes that come in with aging, whether that's petrol or toast or nuttiness, those sorts of things that if a wine's aging well, we actually like to see in it.
Yeah, and I think what's kind of fun to point out about this, Dave, is that most of us don't know much about what the 2009 Riesling was. Like, that was at least before my time, with a heavy focus on wine and maybe some other people. So what do you have to say about it?
The 2009 vintage? Yeah, so actually, yeah, I was there. Yeah, I was there. Part of this wine. And it was kind of a cool year, cool and a little bit bad, I remember. Pretty high acid. And it was myself. It was a 3-person crew that year. Brandon Seeger and Dr.
Dr. Apples.
Shoot, help me. Okay, Dr. Apples.
Dr. Apple.
Yeah, Dr. Apples.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Apples. Gregory Peck, that's who it was. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it was, both, I think I had the semi-dry Riesling, or no, I had the dry Riesling last night from this vintage. And it showed pretty similarly in terms of being really electric acidity, racing acidity. And these wines were they were pretty tight early on, if you remember. In fact, I think we were a little criticized for that. Didn't this get a super low score back 10 years ago? And probably a drink now rating. Sorry, it tastes really good now.
We actually love this because I was working in the tasting room back then. We love this wine because it was one of the lowest scores, and we're all like, I don't know about that. And now it's shining.
Yeah.
What about weather-wise? What was happening that year, 2009? Was that a hot vintage, a cold vintage?
It was pretty cool. I don't recall it being really rainy during harvest though.
No, not to my recollection. I mean, I didn't know anything. That was my first year at Fox Run. But
2009 in June was one of the coolest Junes on record. We had about 6 days of actual sunshine, and the temperatures never really exceeded about 53 or 54 degrees that month. So it was one of the colder Junes on record.
The summer that wasn't.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I guess you guys were looking at kind of a cooler summer with didn't have insane amounts of disease pressure, but maybe not ideal ripening conditions. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that actually 2009 and that vintage was one where the autumn kind of saved our butts, didn't it? Because it was cool during the year and turned into really nice harvest, and everything worked out as it usually does.
Yeah. No. The nines worked out. I think the more recent parallel would be 17 in terms of just a really cool late vintage and also a vintage that got saved by the weather in the fall. I think the difference is 17s, I think we got a little more flavor ripeness on than the nines.
Dave, I think we lost the connection again.
Damn.
Boop-a-loop.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if everybody is streaming so much, if that's just weakening the overall connection. I've been having some issues myself. I was at Michael Broadbent's streamed online memorial service, and it was the same thing.
Yeah. Brian's following along, and he says we're not connected at the moment. He'll let me know when it comes back on.
Okay.
Back to the initial one, like the start, but not the second part.
Okay.
So I haven't even seen that yet.
Meg's the other thing we found up in the attic. All my magic cards.
What?
Nah.
All right, so what I'm getting is a magic card playing going on.
I'll get my scroll deck back together.
Yeah. I also found a recent, it's not an app, but it's like a format you can use for online D&D matches. If anyone's interested.
Damn.
Because my brother has apparently painted his toes and named them and forgot their names, and now they're rebelling against him, so I need to find activities to do with my isolated brother.
It sounds like he's doing acid. I don't know.
We've named Big Right Toe Abner and Small Pinky Toe Biggie Smalls. I feel like those are rememberable. Yeah, you can work with those.
Okay. Man. Go live. I'm pressing go live again.
Alrighty.
we're live again. Sorry about this, people. Yeah, we're live, are we?
All right, folks.
Yay.
You're live?
We are live.
Yay!
So where were we? This is a little annoying. Boy, it's like, yeah, okay. That's okay. Technology is great. Got to be thankful. So where were we?
I think we talked about what was happening that harvest.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I remember, yeah, actually, that was a great harvest because we had our new crush set up, and we had these small little containers. We were catching stems coming out of the December crusher, and then Dr. Apples scared up an apple crate, cut out one side and put it under the crusher. And we said, man, that's a great way to solve, a problem on the spot and on the fly. And then we used that for like 6 more years.
10. It made it until 18.
Like it's
Oh, was that when we replaced it in 18? It had gotten pretty rickety.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe we should pour this other wine, the 2013. Yeah. So this was this would have been Kelby's second vintage at Red Newt, right? 2012 was your first.
Mm-hmm.
But we worked together in 2012.
Yeah.
Kelby came in and worked with me in 2012, and then 2013 I was also in the cellar pretty much full time. But Kelby definitely took the lead on the winemaking, and I don't know if I ever told you this, Kelby. I was watching your every move.
I assumed as much. It was,
Mess it up, so.
It was pressure.
yeah, it was also the first vintage when we had Megs and myself and James, our cellar master, in the cellar more or less full time. We there was a little bit of that in 12, but not really. And then 13 was the first vintage where that really came together.
Yeah, 2013 was the vintage where I actually got to cut my teeth. That was my first full kind of inclusion into what winemaking is and the intensity that harvest can be.
What stands out the most, Kelby, from that vintage?
Honestly, the volume. It was a heavy crop that year, which is not usually what you want to talk about, but it was. It was just an easy growing season, pretty ripe growing season overall. But there's nothing that stands out as being, it's not like, especially compared to something like 2009, which was so extreme.
Yeah, I remember that was the first, substantial crop, or it was one of the larger crops we got from Tango Oaks. I do remember them bringing up, 5 acres, and they brought a bunch of grapes, and we said, "Oh, you must be a couple more, 1 or 2 more trailers," and they said, "No, we're halfway through." No, but it was remarkable because even though the crops were pretty heavy, the concentration and quality of the fruit was really great.
Yeah. Yeah, the wines worked out well. I mean, this wine, we took a look at it, is predominantly or overwhelmingly Lahoma vineyard. So for folks who've been following along with our farm story from earlier this week, this actually almost comes 60% of it's from one block on Lahoma that's up above the knoll called at the time would have been called Sevener. It's a beautiful block of fruit, gives us really nice concentration. But I have to say, I remember this wine being, at the time, absolutely terrifying to work on.
Why?
It went, so Red Newt is a cellar, and this predates me, and, maybe it predates Red Newt because the building's been there before us, there's a level of to which our wines are pretty shut down when they're fermenting. And so to not get too technical about it, but they can be pretty smoky, pretty unappetizing at times because of how cold the cellar is. And with time, that comes around, and you can also adjust for it in the cellar at the same time, but we usually don't. But this 13 dry, the majority component of it was almost punishingly smoky as it fermented. I remember describing it as burned popcorn many times as a young ferment, and frankly up through that spring. But we could kind of see that it was evolving in a way that we thought was really beautiful. That burned popcorn is turning into like ruby red grapefruit with time. So we just let it be and trusted what we'd done in the vineyard and in the winery. And it ended up being the key component of this wine. Yeah, this ferment that made up the majority of this wine was really a nail biter. It was really smoky to the point of being unpleasant. And it took a lot of trust in what, you always say that there's the saying of trusting the process, and things will come around right. And that's really true of how we work in the cellar overall. But this was the first test case that really tested our mettle in terms of how shut down the wine was and whether it would come back around the way we hoped it would. But it did. I mean, it went into bottle. It aged beautifully. That smokiness up front, kind of like struck match smokiness at some point in its life, turning into grapefruit has always been a beautiful thing. And it ended up being a bit of a hallmark for us. I think kind of this would have been the fourth or fifth crop, and probably only the second or third real crop from Lahoma for us. So the vines were just really they certainly weren't becoming mature, but they were starting to show what we would expect of them. And this was, how reductive or how shut down the wine was, the fact that we didn't tinker with it, and that we bottled it in that fashion. These all became things that in subsequent vintages became just almost what we expected of our wines and how we would work with them. And other things started to change around the sides to accentuate what we saw as this new expression of style. But this was the first one that kind of planted the flag in terms of a smokier, dry Riesling.
Yeah, I think this one in particular, I remember this tank, which was the base wine for this. It was our first time that we took on the term "let it ride." It's often been something that we've used in Red Newt. Like, if you're a little curious about it, but there's a lot of potential, you just let it ride. Don't interfere with what the wine is doing. Let it do its own thing, and then you see where it goes.
So I guess my question is, what are we all going to have for dinner with these two wines? I know I'm doing stir fry and chicken pad thai.
Yum.
Yeah. I'm on the Asian move with the Rieslings lately.
All right, well, I know what I'm doing, and it's my first time doing it, so I'm very excited. I'm doing mussels tonight.
Oh, wow. And what kind of broth?
I think a white wine butter, maybe a little bit of heavy cream. I'm not sure if I'm going to throw in just a cherry tomato or two. My life is this.
Delicious.
Uncertainty and hopefully delicious.
And unlike Thursday, none of us will be grilling outside as it is pouring rain here in Finger Lakes.
So I'm going to go, I think, kind of take a right turn here and have something pretty unconventional. Maybe something that hasn't had a lot of history of Riesling pairing. We're going to have Schambergers tonight.
Ooh.
Oh.
Yeah. One of our guests just chimed in, Jonathan and Jen out of New Jersey.
Yeah.
They let us know that they didn't have the 09 or the 13 dry Riesling, so they popped open a bottle of the 13 Knoll, and they're doing lamb meatballs and couscous.
Ooh, that sounds good. Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
It sounds pretty delicious.
I think it's going to be shamburners with bacon and maybe some sort of lime chipotle kind of sauce with maybe on some little focaccia bun or something. Man,
Delicious.
it'll evolve when we get in the kitchen.
Yeah.
How about you, Rebecca?
We're doing seared swordfish steaks on top of wasabi mashed potatoes and bok choy.
That sounds great.
Yes, please.
Kelby, did you try it already?
Inviting me to dinner soon, right? When we can all get to dinner again.
Right.
Hey, I cannot wait until our first dinner party.
Well,
And finally, Mr. Russell, your dinner?
Undecided at the moment.
okay, thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Videos will be available online, and don't forget, we can ship you wine.
Yeah, get ready for next week's tasting. Okay.
It's gonna be good.
Thursday at 4.
Cheers, and if you have not forgotten, remember that it's starting at 6 p.m. tonight. You can open local wine and hashtag open local wine.
Yeah, hey, I already got these open.
Yay!
See ya.
Bye.
How do I do this?